Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment meeting for October the 6th, 2011. Remind you to turn off your cell phones if you have not already. First order of business is the approval of minutes of September 15th, 2011. Are there any corrections or revisions to be made?
I'll move to approve the minutes for September 15th.
I have a motion and a second. Please register your vote. These minutes are approved. We have minutes to receive from August 4th, 2011 meeting and minutes from the July 7th, 2011 meeting to be received. Any revisions or modifications in those minutes?
I'll move to receive those.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please register your vote. They are approved. Any continuance requests from staff?
None today.
Any continuance requests from the public? Hearing none, I would call for our first case.
Item number 1, case number 13460, application for special exception of Unit Petroleum Company to allow a saltwater disposal well located at 728 Southwest Grand Boulevard.
Wayne Smith, 7011 North Robinson, here on behalf of Unit Petroleum Corp. to represent this case. This is a conversion of an existing producing oil and gas well to injection purposes or disposal purposes. So the surface facilities basically won't change any. They'll just change the operation of this existing well. This pad that the well is on has several other producing wells right there within it. So the production will be made there on that site and be injected right back into the same well there on the same site, which eliminates the trucking and piping issues that we normally run into. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any protests? You agree to accept all the requirements of the code?
Yes.
Okay. Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please register your vote. You're approved.
Thank you.
Item number 2, case number 13446, request of EM Real Estate, LLC for a variance to the exterior primary building material and to expand a non-conforming use located at 1500 Exchange Avenue.
We have your name and address for the record, please.
Alec Masted, 1010 Castle Road, Edmond, Oklahoma, 73034.
Speak to your application.
I represent EM Real Estate in their real estate dealings, and we are looking to put a 1,000 square foot metal building behind the existing facility to detail cars. There was originally a detail building there. It has been since destroyed or demolished. All the existing utilities are to that pad, as well as a separation tank for the drain there. So it was one at one time. We plan to reuse it as one, but we have to rebuild the building.
I see the Riverfront Design Committee was to have met today and consider this matter. Do we know whether they met and what the outcome of that?
They did at 9 o'clock this morning and approved my request.
Okay.
Move approval of the application.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please register your vote. You are approved.
Thank you.
Item number 3, case number 13459, request of William Perry McAllister for a variance to permit a residence encroaching the 5-foot side yard setback located at 4305 Northwest 144th Place.
Thank you, Mike Voorhees, on behalf of the applicant, Mr. McAllister. Office address 7701 Southwestern Suite 201, Oklahoma City. We've got a situation where the home was built several years back, and whichever sub was responsible for it poured the footings wrong, and the slab is 0.9 from the side yard. The fence, courtesy of the next door neighbor, has been moved over, so it appears as though you've got the 5-foot setback on that side yard. And we're asking for a variance to the 5-foot setback on the side.
How far is it to the next door neighbor?
problem with utilities here?
No, sir.
No?
If we've got 20 feet, we could have just 10 feet in some cases, isn't that true? We got a 5-foot sideline setback, so we, as far as fire goes, would be okay along that line, wouldn't we?
10 would be the minimum. If there's anything over 10, it would essentially meet the setback
Okay, so we would still have
separation.
separation on thing. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve. Please register your vote. You are approved.
Thank you.
Item number 4, case number 13461, request of Roberts Truck Center for a variance to the maximum 8-foot fence height requirement located at 1600 West Sheridan Avenue.
Michael Pate, the Electric Guard Dog, Columbia, South Carolina. Glad to see y'all again. All
Thank you.
Your ranks are a little...
Like an old friend,
We applied for the permit here. Obviously, we were denied because of the height. We have asked for the variance for the height of the electric security fence, which is placed behind the existing fence. I don't want to be repetitious because you folks have heard this many times before. If you have any questions, be glad to answer.
There's something different about this site in that, I don't know if you're familiar with what's happening with the new roadways going through here.
No, sir.
You're not, well, I-40 is being relocated here,
Okay.
and this is going to become a nice new boulevard going down through this area here, more scenic than it is today. And so that's what differentiates this site from some of the other things you come and talked about here before.
Yes, sir.
Is that the appearance, this is going to be a real appearance corridor as the new boulevard is installed here. And I don't know what the plans look like for the new boulevard or anything, but I've got concern about just that much more ominous-looking fencing along the area.
Well, as I said, we're always behind the existing perimeter fence.
Yeah.
So if it's required, there's a wall, which probably will be if you're doing something like this here. I'm really not sure. But if you got a wall or a fence, we're behind that. You really can't see me except for the signs. I just had a special application in California about 3 weeks ago. They actually asked me to take down the signs so you wouldn't be able to see it. And we could probably do it on that side very easily. Because you're only going to see 3 strands of wire up there, and literally, it's not visible at all.
And before we finish our testimony, we have another speaker that's requested to speak. Could I ask you to be seated for a second?
Sure.
And invite Mr. Pate to come forward if he's present. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's him.
Sorry.
That's him.
You're the applicant, okay.
I'm sorry, I always fill out the form just to make sure.
Okay. Oh, you're confused.
You're not going to
Chair.
speak against it.
Pardon me. Any other discussion, questions for Mr. Pate?
Well, that would be my concern is in terms of in the long term. In the short term, we've still got some time here where we're transitioning and that type of thing. But when we approve these, it's for a time element? Or is this a permanent deal?
Or it could be restricted to the use of whatever business is there now.
Correct.
The point that I think Rod's trying to make is when Interstate 40 is moved south, they're intending to make this corridor a very important gateway into the city, and the appearance and perception by residents and visitors is going to be important.
Understandable.
Well, I understand the issue. I just, if we were to grant this, I'd rather do it in a temporary nature rather than a permanent nature.
You could do a time limit, or you could also limit it to this particular use.
Oh, we could.
If it goes away and redeveloped for something else, the fence would...
We could, but still, if there's...
Or if the property
It
takes
still
hands.
could limit the city's options on how they deal with the...
The fence that there is, is going to be there. I mean, unless you have some sort of mechanism where they actually have to change the type of fence or wall that's going to be facing I-40, you're going to see everything there anyway. You're not going to see my apparatus at all. You're not going to see it.
It's a double fence. with one being higher than the other.
That's true, but it's only 20 strands of wire behind chain link. You cannot see it. That's why I'm almost always allowed to operate anywhere I go, is because of the aesthetic value of what I do. You can't see it like barbed wire or razor wire or anything else. It's practically invisible.
20 strands of wire inside the chain link.
Horizontal to the ground, yes, sir.
So what you see above the existing chain link is
Probably 3 strands.
3 strands of wire.
Yeah, because at that height, they're 8 inches apart. They're 4 inches apart until about 4 feet. That's where most incursions happen. After that, I separate them about 8 inches. And so they're only going to be 3 strands above the existing 8-foot tall chain link fence. And if it's got barbed wire on there right now, which I'm not sure it does, if it has barbed wire, we'll be glad to take that down.
Have you got one someplace else in the city that we could see?
I've got 8 or 9. You guys have approved 8 or 9. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's been 8 or 9. Yes, sir.
Several.
One that you just finished maybe that has, in
Kathy, didn't we just finish one in the historic district downtown? It was,
You did one down at by Blumenthal's, I think.
that's what it was, Blumenthal's, yes.
Yeah.
oh, okay, I've seen
Off
that
Western
one.
there.
Yeah.
someplace, something like
That's
that.
that's the closest one I could think that would be in a district that's very similar to this probably of what you're talking about, we Blumenthal's.
Would you be willing to accept a 2-year and let us take a look at it in 2 years?
I've got no problem with that.
Sure. I'd make that motion that, and if there's a company change or a change in ownership, that we would require a new
Yes, sir.
application and so on.
Yes, sir,
Okay.
and we understand that. If there's a change in ownership in that particular site, we always come back and reapply. I mean, I always try to get the new owner, obviously, to get back on it.
Okay.
So I will reapply, yes.
That's my motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please register your vote. You are approved.
Thank you.
Item number 5, case number 13462, request of Calico Properties for a variance to the required number of parking spaces located at 5209 Southwest 23rd Street.
Good afternoon. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates, 1 East Sheridan Avenue, Oklahoma City. Here on behalf of the applicant. As the staff report outlines, this is a request to reduce the number of parking spaces that would normally be required because of the size of the buildings. This is a industrial tract of land just south of 15th Street, the new 15th Street that was extended from MacArthur east to Meridian. In this particular application and applicant, they assemble oil rigs and drilling paraphernalia. They bring in a lot of heavy steel equipment, and this entire area here is a rig setup area where they actually build the rig on site and then take it back apart, load it on trucks, and haul it off. The building, as you can see, this dark gray area is the main manufacturing building. That's where they do their welding of the pieces. This is a paint shop. There's a future building back here proposed to be a warehouse. And this is their office building, which is only 5,000 square feet. So based on the code, we'd be required to have 105 spaces. The lighter gray area is all that's being paved. The rest of the site will be gravel because of the truck equipment and the heavy loads that they carry around and the type of work they do. So this particular applicant will never have any more than 30 employees on this site, and we're providing 49 spaces. Yeah, 49.
Hey, Tim? How much built-out office space is there on the site?
5,000 square feet.
5,000. That requires about 26 spaces, right?
Correct.
And then there's 47,000 feet of warehouse?
Correct.
Isn't that 1 to 1,000, or is it more than that?
Well, there's actually 36,400 square feet in this manufacturing building, a projected number of 250 here, and then a warehouse up here that's another 12,000, so it's about twice that. So it'd be an additional.
But I mean, as part of this application, we're approving all of that future
We're
stuff?
approving the reduction in parking for the entire site based on currently this is all that's under construction, but this is all the paving they'll ever do. So that's why we're requesting the variance at this time. So we could, to answer your question, we could come very close to getting our permit just for these two buildings,
Yeah.
but it would not allow us to put these up, and they're
Okay, so you're basically trying to permit all of the
for the whole
buildings?
site.
For-
yeah.
Okay.
And the timing of those, it's just they're not under construction today, but
Well, I
they
couldn't
may
figure
be.
that out from the application because it talked about, in the application, it looks like 73 spots. That's what it looks like.
Sorry to confuse you.
Well, that's easy.
But, so, I know the one negative comment from the staff was that we'd be 56 spaces short. That's why we're here. So, I mean, really, from an impact standpoint, this is an infill piece of property next to a very large floodplain, floodway. It's become a single-use application, which is pretty apropos in this location.
Move approval for this owner. Is that all right?
Yes.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Register your vote.
Thank you.
You're approved.
Item number 6, case number 13244, request of Doug Friesen for extension of the time period approved for completion pursuant to an order of the board located at 524 Northwest 17th Street.
Doug Friesen, 1309 North Chartel, attorney for Burden Mary Bowman. We returned here today for a further report as to the status of the list of improvements or list of items that were incomplete. Everything on the items 1, 2, and 3 that are on the first floor are in fact done at this point. The only thing that has not been completed on both on the south, east, and west sides are those things on the second story and essentially the attic. We talked to the contractor that I had told you about 2 weeks ago, and that was rebuilding his house because he had lost it in the Piedmont tornado. He indicated that he was going to be farther behind than he thought. As a result of which, we found another contractor that has agreed to start either Monday or Tuesday and has given us a completion date of 2.5 weeks after he starts to complete all the rest of those items, with a single exception. Following your request that I meet with Catherine, I met with Catherine on the item number 4 on site work, the steps. There were actually there was a deviation in the plans which were submitted initially. One of those showed a double walk or a double porch and sidewalk. Another one showed a single sidewalk coming down there. As she and I were discussing what to do, we have the contractor that's lined up and ready to go on that, but she indicated that no matter which way we go, it could potentially be in violation of one or the other, so she indicated that I should talk to this body and find out which way you wanted me to go on it. I've talked to the homeowner, and I can tell you what their preference would be, but that item is not in fact done at this point because the plans that were originally approved were in conflict with each other. I met with her and went over the list of the things that she thought were inconsistent. Some of those we reached an agreement on. Some of those there were necessary changes as the things went along, and I believe I've explained those to her, and I'll be happy to explain them to the board if you want. I think that's the complete report that I needed to make. We have pictures that were taken once a week that I have for you as per your suggestion. What questions do you have?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to check with, and I thank you for being here again today, is to make sure that you did comply with the order of our last meeting, and one of them was that the Bowmans are present. I believe I see that the Bowmans are present. One
That's
is that
correct.
Mr. Nelson be present, and I see Mr. Nelson, that you stay in weekly contact with Catherine Montgomery. It sounds as, I don't know whether it was weekly, but it sounds like you've been in communication with her.
Talked to Catherine the week after our meeting. I called her on Tuesday of this week, and then she sent me an email. I was not able to talk to her. She sent me an email. But I believe that we have talked about all of the items on this group and at least made a plan. She asked me to submit some information to her as a result of that meeting. I did that 3 or 4 days later and did not receive any further questions for her, but I called her pursuant to your instructions to call her approximately weekly.
And I believe that's the intent, is that you establish regular communication with her and work on not only the work to be completed, but anything non-conforming that needs to be discussed. Mr. Nelson, do you have those photographs that you could distribute for us today?
I have those photographs here. May I
You could just
approach?
give them to Kathy and she can distribute them to the board.
There are 3 of them. The one at the beginning is the earliest work, and the one at the end, obviously the latest.
Mr. Dell is present today and is asked to speak. Could I excuse you for a moment and invite Mr. Dell forward, please?
My name is Brian Dell. I live at 528 Northwest 17th Street, which is immediately west of the property in which you are discussing. My wife and I have been here numerous times, and the only thing we're really concerned about is that we really would like to see this project completed because it's been going on for more than a decade. Yesterday, we were down here before the Historical Preservation Commission on the front porch, something that had been before that commission more than a year ago, and the application had been denied and went before this board and was denied, and a year has passed by, and another 60-day continuance has gone on that. I realize that that's not actually an issue for the board to be considering today, but this project has been one delay after another, and it would appear to us, in any event, that it has been continually and always intentional, and that there appears to be no end to it. I understand and heard that their contractor will start on Monday. We would like to see that. As was noted yesterday during the Historical Preservation Commission by members of that commission, that there are non-conforming windows on the east side, something that I can't see. I provided you all with a letter this past Friday that I presume was circulated to you that has given you the details of what we can see and the non-conforming matters that we can see. And I haven't heard those addressed by the applicant or the owners. And that's what we want. And what we ask the board to do is to do everything that it can to see to it that this project is completed in a reasonable time, like in our lifetime, because it's going way beyond anything that we otherwise would expect.
Understood. And I think you'll find this board sympathetic to the plight, and we share your desire to see the house finished expeditiously. And when Catherine testifies, we'll ask her about those windows specifically.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Bowmans have traveled to come see us. Could I invite them to step forward, please? If you would, just your name and address, each of you, for the record.
Yes, sir. My name is Dan Bowman. I guess you guys see it as Bert. Bert's just a nickname. To be honest, an address right now, I really don't have one. I finally was able to sell my property in Colorado. This home that I have here, we're not real sure what the status is going to be with it. My life's kind of in flux right now. I'd be more than happy to address as long as I'm comfortable with that, if you have any questions about that.
Well, you're aware that this board, has dealt with this property for a period of time right now, and that there's frustration, I think, at the city and certainly, the Dells and the neighborhood association and other neighbors. And one of the responsibilities that any of us accept when we buy a home in a historic neighborhood is the requirements that are, imposed on us to care for and fix up and maintain that house are different than if we lived in other parts of the city.
Agreed.
And what we're looking for, I think, is your commitment and a common understanding that we understand what all the issues are before us, and that we have your commitment particular, that you will do everything in your power to not only complete the work that was part of this board's order, but the other work that's needed to complete the house, so that, I mean, it benefits you as the homeowner, and it certainly benefits the community and the neighbors in the neighborhood.
Well, if I may help you a little bit with this, I'm not familiar with the past. We've only owned the property a little over a year and a half. We are doing everything we can within the bounds of our finances to try to get this done, okay? And and you're right, there is a lot to a historical property. You know, we've had to shore up and all kinds of stuff to do with it, and we are trying to accommodate as best we can with the budget that we can on the time surface we can, and we're trying to adjust as we need to accommodate your needs as they come up.
And we appreciate that, and I think, you know, we were told at the last meeting that you were able to sell the home in Colorado, and so that relieves you of some of the financial burden that you were under.
Well, and you are very fortunate here in Oklahoma in the real estate market. Colorado, we were not so fortunate, so it was the first time in my life that I've had to bring a substantial check as a seller. So my issue, and we are factoring all this into what we need to do to help you guys as well.
Do you intend to keep this home?
At this point in time, yes, we do. The home was purchased. I'll be honest, I did work for the FAA. I retired 4 days ago, 5 days, well, whatever last Friday was my last day in the FAA. That property was purchased because I used to teach here at the Aeronautical Center, loved Oklahoma City, moved to Denver because I had to for some issues. Those got resolved, and I had been approached to try to come back to teach here again for the FAA. This property became available. We did what we could to try to accrue the property with the intention that when the job came open, we were going to bid it. A job has come open 3 times since then, and due to federal budget constraints, the jobs were canceled without selection. So, you know, the property was purchased with the intent of moving into it. Our life is in flux right now, and we, at this time, our plan is to continue to work with you to get the property up to the standards that it needs to be.
But you do intend, but I guess it's contingent upon the job position opening up and being available?
Correct. At this point, we really don't know exactly what's going to happen. We're just retiring. The house is sold in Denver. We've got different family issues, health issues with mothers that have come up as well. We intend to be here, but we can't make any promises.
And if I could, if you would just state your name and...
I'm sorry, my name is Mary Bowman.
And I just, for the record, I assume, you know, you own the house at 524 Northwest 17th, so
Yes,
that would be your address. It may not be where you live presently. Are you renting or living?
We have a caretaker in the property because we went through this when we acquired the property. We had a discussion. Do we want to go through the problem of renter, which would only make things harder for us to accomplish your tasks? So no, we have a caretaker. We just figured that was an easier way to make sure I'm not comfortable with the property being left vacant.
One of the reasons for calling you to appear is, you know, Lana had represented you at one time, and Doug has appeared before us a couple of times, is we have no way of knowing how clear the communication was. And there have been, our business, you know, regarding this property began in June of 2010. And we felt like that we had communicated clearly, you know, what was approved and what the board's order consisted of. And here we are, you know, nearly a year and a half, and still not done. And so, you know, I can tell you that our patience, I believe, is wearing thin, and, you know, you begin to wonder, what is it going to take to get this done? And we understand the limitations of, you know, financial resources. But one reason for asking you and Mr. Nelson to appear is to make sure that we have that common understanding, that this board order is to be taken seriously. It is not to just be dismissed. We don't want to be gamed. We expect you to comply. And when I ask him to stay in touch with her, that's what I intend. And when I want photographs of the progress from one meeting to the next, that's what I want.
Well, I understand that, sir, and it's my understanding that every time that you've had a request, if we were doing something that might impact getting your request done, we have stopped that and moved on to yours. So this process is actually run my expenses a little bit more, well, actually substantially more than what we were counting on, because we had a building plan and we're trying to work things out, and we've had to alter that a little bit.
Well, let me
on how to
tell
go
you
about
one
that.
thing that we found out just recently is that, the resources of the contractor and the money you were spending were basically being used inside the home, instead of finishing up the exterior of the home in compliance with this board's order. The priority should have been to set the interior work aside, do the work that the board has ordered you to do on the exterior of the house. Then you can turn your attention to the interior of the house.
We understand that. I was just trying to, the plan was try to make it as, the long-term project to be as economically effective, or, to try to keep costs down from start to finish.
One question and one clarification. You mentioned a caretaker. Could you identify the caretaker?
This
for
is
the home?
Doug Friesen.
Okay. I would open it up if other board members have questions.
I said at the last meeting, I would not vote to extend this, but I think you have satisfied my concern, and my concern is exactly what the chairman has said. And if we don't see significant progress, I'm not going to vote for continuation on this thing.
Well, Mr. Allen, and feel free, there was a gentleman that came out 3 or 4 days ago, maybe 2 days ago. When was the settled? There was a gentleman that identified himself as a civilian with the preservation district, and he walked around. I purposely, the nice thing was, his contractor was there, so that's the person to talk to. And I heard him make a comment to Mr. Nelson that after he walked around the outside, that he felt that there was quite a bit of work done. So,
well, one thing you can do, and I've spent 45 years in the construction business, and I know you can do this. You can clean up that job every afternoon or every evening. You can put your ladders and stuff on the back side so that this man doesn't have to look at that stuff.
okay.
When you do work, there's nothing wrong with cleaning it all up at the end of the day, and it's a good work environment. This man's had to look at this stuff not only for a year and a half, he's been looking at it, like he said, for over a decade.
Mr. Allen, we're not here all the time, but we have made periodic visits and stuff when they weren't knowing we were going to be here because we have family here.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never driven by after hours and seen ladders and stuff in the front yard or even on the side. I've always seen John clean up as he's done his work. From my personal point of view, I've always been happy with the way he leaves things when he leaves.
Well, see, the ladders and stuff are in the pictures here and that, he doesn't want to look at that stuff. So.
If I could address the picture, number one, that's on the east side where he doesn't have to look on it. Number two, that was taken during the day while he was actually doing the work to show the work during the progress of the day. Those things.
There's a neighbor on the east side, though, isn't there?
There is a neighbor on the east side. We've talked to them. There is not a problem. But what I'm saying is that picture, the ladder that's reflected there, the picture was taken in the middle of the day while he was working. Stuff is not left out at night.
Okay. But I think my concern, I've let you know, and I also have the same concern that our chairman has put forth. And to put it bluntly, we're tired of this thing. And I know the neighbor's tired of it.
At this time, I'd like to excuse you for a moment and invite Catherine Montgomery, please.
Catherine Montgomery, Historic Preservation Architect for the City of Oklahoma City. I have some fresh photographs. The last time we met, I didn't have the most recent photographs, so I've only provided for you today August 30th, September 13th, and October 3rd. So that's 3 different steps. sorry this isn't as far along as expected. We had a busy month at HP this month. We did meet, Mr. Friesen and I met on September 19th, and we discussed each item that was on the list that had been presented to you previously. The list remains as it was on August 4th, with the exception that the things that had been completed on the first part of the list have been crossed out. There has been some progress toward painting and some continued wood replacement work, but it's not completed, so those items haven't been crossed out. On the back, the items that were inconsistent with the drawings that had been approved was basically the subject of the meeting that I had with Mr. Friesen on September 19th. And if you have a minute, I can just run through each one of those things. If we back up to item number 4, which is on page 2, having to do with the sidewalk, it was recognized that item 4B, the brick sidewalk, won't be able to be completed as drawn because they wish to save the tree, and the tree is in the way of where the sidewalk was drawn. So there will likely need to have some modification to achieve that. Also on item 4A, there was a discrepancy in the drawings on the elevation. It showed, I think on the elevation it showed a single door, and on the plan it showed a double door. May have been vice versa. In any event, the applicant or the owner prefers to have the double wide steps, so that would be a matter of clarification, not necessarily a difference. Then we move on to item 1, west elevation. The window air conditioner is there as a temporary measure, and it will be removed at the time that the HVAC is completed on the interior. The trim around the top north end pair of windows appears wider than drawn. If you'll refer to the last 3 pages of your report, Mr. Friesen provided some measurements upon my request to measure the trim on the new windows on the addition and compare that to the trim that's at the original windows on the front of the house. And you can see that there are some differences, not that the drawings ever had specific measurements on them in order to be able to, judge that against a drawing. These drawings, of course, are at about 1/8 of an inch scale, so an inch is not going to be that big. So the dimensions, in my opinion, on the trim are within the range of tolerability. The pair of windows on the top south are shorter than drawn. There was acknowledgement by Mr. Friesen that that was true, and that the windows that were shown on the east elevation will not be able to be as long or as tall as originally depicted because there's a bathtub underneath them, and they didn't want the sill to interfere with that. The pair of windows on the top south, sorry, we did that already. Through the wall, there's a through-the-wall ventilator under the top north end windows. It wasn't shown on the elevation. For an elevation of this level of detail, it's not the biggest issue, but I just pointed out to Mr. Friesen that I needed to make sure that I pointed out things that were different, and that was something that was different. Of course, that would need to remain for some ventilation requirements on the interior. Item E, through-the-wall ventilator, similar to item D, just in a different location and near the foundation wall. Similarly, that's providing some ventilation, and it's not a major issue on the addition. I interpreted the opening at the foundation wall of the addition to be windows. Upon closer examination, I can tell that was not windows at all. It was an access door. There's some little handles there. The access door that has been constructed is of a different size, and it's a single leaf as opposed to the double leaf which was shown. It's not a historical feature, and it's not visible from the public right-of-way, so I don't know that that's really a big deal. Item 2, south elevation. The windows on the second floor appear to be smaller than those drawn. Trim around these windows appears to be wider, and the space in between the pairs of windows appears to be wider. The dimensions that have been provided by Mr. Friesen are on those drawings. I have not actually verified those dimensions, but that's certainly something that I could do. Trim around the lower west pair of windows appears wider. Again, the dimension issue. The opening for the door appears to be a double door instead of a single leaf, as shown on the elevation. That's true. You can see that the elevation shows a single door, and the door width is a single door with 2 side lights. That's a deviation, but in the floor plan it did show a double wide stair, so it's actually a contradiction in the drawings. The divided light windows are not as indicated. The windows are shown without divided lights. It is a deviation from what was shown in the drawings. Mr. Friesen has assured me that those windows are true divided light windows. I haven't verified that, but that would be the requirement if they were to have divided lights in an HP area. On the east elevation, the windows on the second floor are indicated as 2 pairs. I don't think you have the east elevation, and I apologize for that. You can look at the photographs, though. So if you look at October 3rd's photographs, which are the last 2 pages, page 2, the bottom photograph shows the east elevation. So the windows on the second floor were originally shown to be 2 pairs of windows, and there's only 1 pair that is in place. Mr. Friesen acknowledged that that was a deviation from the drawings and wishes to leave it the way that it is. The second item B, the second floor window pair that's actually there appears smaller than as drawn, which was also acknowledged that it is smaller than what was drawn, and that's a deviation, and their desire is to keep them the way they are. There are 2 openings that are not shown on the drawings. In the lower south window was shown as siding, and the lower north pair was shown as a pair of hung windows. That's where you have these kind of 2 picture windows that have some subdivisions on them. It was acknowledged that the subdivisions in those windows are like snap-in or applied muntins, which is generally not consistent with the guidelines, and it's a deviation. Then again, the crawl space would have been mentioned here too, but I didn't pick that up originally. It's the same issue. The window area north of the lower north window. Okay, this is a little difficult to see where the ladder is. There's a window. It's on the edge of the picture, on the right edge of the picture. It looked like in the drawing that was shown as brick veneer, and it's wood shingles. It's always been wood shingles. You can tell those are the old wood shingles, and it was not intended for it to be brick. So it's a deviation, but the way it appears today was the way it was intended. That's what I know.
So I think we're appreciative of the progress that's been made. How do we work out these issues that still remain?
Well, I don't know. That might be a question for legal, because obviously the board approved certain drawings, and the addition, the final result that's there that they wish to have remain is different from the drawings that the board or the board's order was based on. So I don't know if the board can accept these changes, or if that's something that would have to go back to HP.
Rita, can you address?
The appeal was from a denial of a decision of the Historic Preservation Commission. And when you all decided to approve the addition, the installation of the rear addition, part of your order was that it would be in compliance with historic preservation guidelines. what Catherine Montgomery is saying is that it didn't happen that way. So right now, based on what she's saying, the work was not done in compliance with your order. So the options that remain might include a different review by you. You could say, this isn't what we gave you authority to do. On your request for modification, you could consider whether or not this is adequate. But keep in mind that your initial order was that the work be done in compliance with historic preservation guidelines. So based on what she's saying, the order was not complied with. But where you are and what's before you, rather than it being the work, is the extension of the work, the time in which to do the work. So where we are actually is at a compliance place rather than something for the board to address. What's before you and what's on the agenda is simply whether or not to get additional time, not how the work was done.
Give them additional time to complete work that's not in compliance.
Correct. That's what's on the agenda is...
Or to make corrections of non-conforming or items that were installed and not in conformance.
So you could say, this is not in compliance, this is not what we granted you additional time to do, so you get no more time. Or you could say, we'll give you additional time in which to comply with the order we did approve, which was to do the rear addition in compliance with historic preservation guidelines.
So, Mr. Friesen, if you would, we're not only talking about whatever your request is of us today in terms of time. You're asking not only to fulfill the board's order for the scope of the construction, but also to deal with these non-conforming items.
Correct. Now, that is not to say that I may not have an explanation for some of the non-conforming items and ask this board to accept them. I have not done that yet. And I'll just give you a brief example.
Well, I think what counsel is telling us is that's not the matter before us today. The matter
Correct.
before us today is simply the amount of time that you're telling us you need to conform with the board's order, which includes correcting the installation of non-conforming items.
Yes, sir.
So I guess the question, for you is how much time are you asking for?
6 weeks.
And remembering that this board meets again on October the 20th and then November the 3rd.
November the 3rd is going to be stretching it. I know it will not, assuming that the contractor is right on the time frame that he has told me, that's going to be a 3-week job to get all the remaining shingles, the stuff on the second floor stuff done. That would be pushing it to have done by October.
November the 3rd is about 5 weeks from now.
Is it about how many?
5 weeks.
It'll be tight, but we're certainly going to try and get everything accomplished by then.
I take that back. Today is the 6th, so it's actually, 30 days or so, just under 30 days. Yeah. Not quite 30 days.
But you're not going to have them completed per the original board order. You're asking for changes to what the board order was originally.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that those things have not been discussed with the homeowner, and I need to yet, to find out whether or not he wants them made. There were reasons why the changes were made. Whether or not he could live with these, or whether or not he's going to want me to change those, or they're going to want me to change those, I can't tell you at this time until I talk to them. It may be that my instructions are to simply make it the way it was in the plans.
Well, it seems counterproductive to give them more time to do something that they're unsure that they can accomplish.
Well, at any rate, what would be accomplished would be the shingling and the completion of the items that are unfinished at this time.
I think what Mr. Friesen is saying that he's unwilling to commit to right now are some of the non-conforming items. What you are committing to finish are the construction that was part of the order.
Correct.
And what you're saying, I'm not sure about, are some of the items that are non-conforming.
Correct. That's the only part I was addressing on that.
So we won't get the job done.
Well, I think you're estimating around 6 weeks based on the timeline that you've got from these contractors that you've got lined up.
Correct. We fired the other one because, in fact, I think it was Mr. Allen that said, see if you can't find somebody better, and when the other gentleman wanted to extend it out, we said fine, and they have committed to us that they're going to start Monday or Tuesday, and that it's a 3-week job. Now, for some reason, they don't show up, and I have no reason to expect that. I've got the contract here, price has been agreed to, job has been agreed to. No reason to suspect they won't. I'm just saying that those things aren't in my control because I don't have the hammer in my hand.
So, but at the end of the day, we won't have the job done then. Because all that's being agreed to are items that would be under the, would be repaired or remodeled under the way the board order was approved. And the other things will still be outstanding, and we have to deal with them at that point in time.
That's my understanding, is the non-conforming, you're saying you're not willing to commit to those today, that you need the opportunity to discuss those with the Bowmans.
I'm not saying that they won't be done. I'm saying that I don't have the authority, and until my clients and I sit down and talk, I can't commit to it, and they don't know what we're talking about.
And you're aware, even if you do the new construction and the non-conforming items are not dealt with, you're still not in compliance with the board order?
Absolutely.
So I would say to the other board members, we have the opportunity to continue them, not continue them, and give them a time frame, or, to at least check back and give us evidence of measurable progress toward the completion of this work, and to also report to us on the decision of the Bowmans about the items that are non-conforming. If the Bowmans chose not to address those items, then what happens? Counsel?
Your board order requires that as I was saying, requires compliance based on the historic preservation guidelines. If that work is not done, and if an extension is granted, as Board Member Baker was saying, you're extending the time perhaps to allow continued work on a structure that is not in compliance with what you ordered. So you could decide today to give Mr. Friesen until your October 20th meeting to visit with the property owners and determine what action, if any, they can take to bring the property in compliance with historic preservation guidelines, and make your final decision at that time based on the information you receive.
I would, before we, get to the point where we make a decision on this, I would invite Mr. Dell. Do you have any other comments or questions of Catherine while she's present about the house, and questions about work on the house? You saw the report. Yes. Do you have any more questions of Catherine or of the board?
No.
Thank you.
She has adequately described the things that are not in compliance with what Rick said.
Okay. Thank you. And I suppose if we did consider a continuance to October the 20th, that would not relieve you of the responsibility to continue to make progress on the work that you've already intended to do and the work that's already scheduled. I think you understand what this board is interested in is we not only want the new construction to be completed, but we want the non-conforming items dealt with.
I understand
as well. And it would have been nice today to have known your position on those, or to have your assurance that those were going to be taken care of.
when I talk, and we may be using non-conforming here in a different way. A lot of the non-conforming items are non-conforming to the original plans, not non-conforming to the historical society or historical committee's guidelines, if you will. To the extent that they are non-conforming to the historical committee guidelines, those are obviously going to have to be changed and changed immediately. And there's no reason for even arguing about those.
So they're not going to be part of your discussion. You're committing to address those and to make those changes and remedy those.
If they are not compliant with the historical guidelines, that part is absolutely true.
Are there parts of the house where there are other discrepancies that are outside the HP guidelines that might need to be dealt with, Catherine?
Based on what I know today, my primary concern with what is against the guidelines are those two kind of picture windows on the east side. Other than that, the other windows, appear to be the right materials, and they're not the same size and they're not in the same locations as the drawings, but they're not non-compliant with the guidelines themselves.
Tell us what your intentions are then on those east windows, because it sounds to me like that may be the last place that there's...
The purpose for the east windows was, and if you can look at the south elevation drawing, there is a door, or a wall right between the outside access door and the set of windows that are immediately to the left of that. That was originally designed as a breakfast nook. As the construction took place, it became obvious that it was extremely dark in that room, and that was the reason for the oversized windows that were put in there to, I guess for lack of a better reason, just simply bring more light in. I'll need to get together with Catherine and find out the largest size that she's going to allow those to be, if those are too big for the historical guidelines. And I'll do that the first of next week.
So am I understanding that in essence you're agreeing to make any changes that are required to fall within the HP guidelines, with the exception of this question on the east windows, which you are committing to discuss with Catherine and to work on a possible solution? I mean, if she tells you what it has to be, then
it's going to have to be.
Then it's going to have to be that.
Sure.
So you don't, at this point, we don't need to go back to the homeowners, to the Bowmans?
Correct.
For anything, because we have your commitment?
That's right.
To fall in. Okay. Excuse me. Mr. Dell would like to address us, please.
Having spent yesterday with 8 members of the Historical Preservation Commission and heard the debate that they had about the compliance of the various things, this idea about bypassing the Historical Preservation Commission and coming in and saying that, well, I didn't do it the right way, but my plan is in fact compliant, is bypassing the Historical Preservation Commission. If there's some dispute about the type windows that they have in there, it would be appropriate, to my view anyway, that be sent back to the Historical Preservation Commission to be determined whether it in fact complies with the historical guidelines. I heard the debate yesterday between the members of that commission and the members of the planning staff to be different. So I would urge that if indeed this is an issue with regard to whether those windows are not what's on the drawing but are compliant, that be a determination initially made by the Historical Preservation Commission to come back to this board if necessary.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Catherine to address that, please. In your view, is it something that needs to go back to HP if those east windows are not compliant, or is that something where the homeowner can, and Doug can...
Well, I think yes, because my understanding of what comes before the Board of Adjustment is something that is exactly the same as what was denied by the Historic Preservation Commission. And in this case, we have something that is desired to exist, which is different from what the board approved.
But right now, is there ambiguity, Mr. Friesen, on what the requirement is for those east windows? Because if you know what the HP guideline is going to require of you, then let's just do it.
I do not know what the HP guidelines are. I knew that they were non-conforming to the drawings. I did not know, and it didn't come up apparently between Catherine and I, or if it did, I didn't hear her say that they were non-conforming to the HP guidelines, but they may be.
Then I would just tell Mr. Dell, you don't have to approach it, but I would just tell you that it sounds to me like Mr. Friesen understands that the windows do not conform with the HP guidelines. I don't think there's a reason that it has to go back to HP, because he's telling us that he's going to find out what the proper window is that conforms to the HP guideline, and you're going to do it.
That's correct.
The only thing that I heard, though, was that he said that the windows don't match the drawing, but that they are compliant. I don't know that that's the case.
I don't believe it was his intention to state that the windows that were installed now were compliant. He just said he didn't know, and he will find out what's in compliance under the HP guidelines, and that's what you're going to do. So you're going to remove the windows on the east exposure if that's necessary to put in a window or windows that are compliant with HP guidelines. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The only thing that I would point out was that based on that discussion that we had yesterday with the HP Commission, there was a divergence in the 8 members of that committee versus what the planning department interpreted as those guidelines. I believe that under the circumstances that it is the HP committee that has to make that determination, not the planning or the HP group. And that's what happened yesterday.
Catherine, is that accurate in your view?
Staff has to make a recommendation and find specific findings of fact on all of the cases that are brought before the commission. Sometimes they agree with staff and sometimes they don't, and there is discussion that ensues. That's what makes that group important. But as far as this is concerned, what I've been trying to focus on is having the addition be achieved based on what the Board of Adjustments order was, which is a certain set of drawings. And so the divergences from those drawings are what I've tried to focus on, not so much in thinking about what's in compliance with the HP guidelines, because technically the addition was denied by the HP Commission. So we're working with the Board of Adjustment order. So things that are different from what was presented to the Board of Adjustment, I would seek to have corrected so that they match those drawings. There remain some items that would not necessarily be against the guidelines if Mr. Friesen were to, in a perfect world, go back to the HP Commission and ask for some of the changes, like the sizes of the windows in certain instances. I just don't know where those changes can be appropriately dealt with, whether that's actually an application to the HP Commission to consider or whether that's something that the Board of Adjustment can deal with. I will let you know that there is a second application there was another application that Mr. Friesen has filed on behalf of the owners that was considered at the HP Commission meeting yesterday. It's our practice that if there are additional items that wish to be added to an application while it remains open, which this one does at this time, then they can add some things. I don't know if it's appropriate to add some of those things in to that application or to have them file a new application for consideration of the changes on the addition that was approved by the Board of Adjustment, or
So we have to deal with what we have in front of us now?
You are authorized to affirm, modify, or deny based on what is presented to you on appeal from the HP Commission. So you could say that what you are doing is modifying what you received from them. But because it does involve an area of specific expertise and because you do have a body that can review those things, you could decide to remand what has been done to the HP Commission for them to review, to see if it is in compliance with historic preservation guidelines. If they say that it is, then you're back to where you were, which was, shall this applicant be given additional time? If they say that it is not, then you are still at the same place, because all that's being asked is whether or not they can have additional time, and you're still in an enforcement mode.
I think I would be more inclined to remand it back so we can get clarity on all of these issues.
And so if we remand it back to HP, then that would deal with the east window issue and the other issues, am I correct?
Well, you could bring all of this together, even the new items.
They have not made a decision on the new items yet.
So, but they could handle all that in one meeting, I imagine, right? You could handle the existing conditions in addition to the new.
We could think about that, because I don't know if it's better to just let those things continue to go in the package that they are, and then have a new application that deals with these items. You know, to me, it would be whichever solution is going to be the cleanest and the easy, you know, procedurally the easiest to deal with. I had another thought, but I lost it.
Well, procedurally, it would be easier if you remanded the matter to HP for discussion just on the rear addition, got their comments on just the rear addition, and then during the same time period, the appellant could put together some kind of package that says, the HP Commission says this is in compliance, it's not in compliance. If they say that it's not in compliance and that specific work needs to be done to make it in compliance, when they appear before you again, they could have a list of those items that are not in compliance and a timeline that says when they will be in compliance. So then the thing before you, the request for additional time, would be for items specific. It wouldn't just be a general grant of time. It would be, the Historic Preservation Commission has said you need to redo this. So they would take that apart piece by piece and give you dates and times for completion of specific work. So you could order that if you chose.
Well, to me, that seems like the way to bring clarity and a distinctive pattern to completion on the deal, because we've been dealing with this for a year and a half, you know, and I've been here 11 years, we've never managed a construction project before, and it doesn't seem reasonable to expend the taxpayer dollars doing this, you know. I mean, we have to bring exact clarity to where we are right now, and we got to say you're gonna do this and this and this by this particular period in time. Otherwise,
Is there other work that could proceed that's not in dispute and that's not part of what's being remanded back to HP?
Well, that was the question I was going to ask. If this is remanded back, does that prohibit the homeowner from continuing with the contract that they had, that is not in dispute about the work that needs to be done, that is now scheduled to start Monday or Tuesday?
It would seem to me that what we're looking for, what we're remanding back to HP is for areas that we're seeking clarification on, but that there's work that we've approved on the rear addition that's not, where we are not seeking that clarification. Am I correct?
That's correct, like the completion of the shingling work and the reconstruction of the brackets.
The thing that we would need to do for Mr. Friesen and the homeowners then is, if we chose to consider a continuance for you, is that we are very specific in terms of which items you can proceed work on, and then those other items we would consider remanding back to HP for their judgment and clarification on. I don't know how the other board members feel, but with something like that, does that sound reasonable to you?
That is certainly acceptable.
So, board.
how do you say that? Because if you say that, then we have to have an itemized list of everything that's open to be completed, open to be worked on.
I think it would be easier to list exclusions to,
I don't know that it would be that difficult. All the items under her list of remaining unfinished, with the exception of 4, the site work. In other words, 1, 2, and 3 could be separated out, because I don't think there's any disagreement as to the fact that those just need to be done. Then the site work, the plans were different in terms of number 4. So 4 and the the potentially non-conforming items on 1, 2, and 3 could be remanded over there. So I don't know that it would be that difficult, and that would certainly 1, 2, and 3 on the items unfinished are what the contract, or what we have the contractor set up to do in the next 3 weeks.
Okay. Catherine, do you concur?
I would agree with that. I think that because the drawings that the Board of Adjustment saw had a discrepancy between the plan and the elevation as to the nature of the door on the back, you can decide either to send that back to HP for a decision, or perhaps you could resolve that discrepancy.
Can you reference?
Item 4A,
Okay.
site work, page 2. And then item 4B is technically an administratively approvable item, so.
So what we would consider is basically 1, 2, and 3 in their entirety minus the stricken items. Okay.
Could we just say that the items under the unfinished, 1, 2, 3, and 4 progress be made and progress be presented to the board, and then on items that are non-conforming, 1, 2, and 3, be addressed at October the 10th?
The only correction I would have is on the items where work would progress now is that we're going to take item 4, site work, out, because the brick sidewalk is not part of what we oversee.
Okay, so we'll eliminate
Catherine just gave us
the sidewalk.
Right, so the work that would continue would be remaining unfinished items 1, 2, and 3 in their entirety, except for the items that are stricken from this document. What we would remand back to HP are the list of things completed and inconsistent with the approved back addition, items 1, 2, and 3, as well as 4A, which would go back, which would be remanded back.
4A and 4B, I believe, because the plans are inconsistent.
I'd have to review 4B also.
Okay.
That's a motion then. Because he stated it succinctly there.
Okay. Jim, do you understand?
I do.
We have a motion,
That's to,
and the one thing we haven't
that's to October 20th?
is which meeting?
The 10th.
Oh, no?
Depends on when they can get it to HP.
Well, but October 20th for further review on items 1, 2, and 3, and then when it comes back from HP for review on the rest of it.
Okay.
So you retain jurisdiction for the rest of it because you're remanding it.
Is October 20th acceptable for you to come back and report to us on progress?
Oh, come back and report on progress, absolutely. Understand that will not be within the time frame.
The work will not be completed, but you will be able to update us.
Assuming that
progress report.
the gentleman doing the construction has a correct time frame, that would be outside of it.
And Mr. Nelson, do you have is there some additional work from Mr. Nelson still to complete?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we can document that. Photographs are helpful. You'll be in touch with Catherine, and you will help us document our progress between now and October the 20th.
Keep in mind that things that get remanded back to the HP Commission will be the deadline for the November meeting has passed, so if an application comes in by the first, by October 31st, then it could be on the December docket. And if those items are approved, the standard certificate of appropriateness is good for 1 year. And I don't know if that impacts your thinking or not.
This is a different thing. This is a remand for review. So we will not seek a certificate of appropriateness. It would just be
Comments?
Comments.
Okay.
Okay, we settled. I'll second the motion. And one other thing, too. The last time I looked at this project, and I can't remember when, but this looks significantly better than it did the last time I looked at it from the outside.
We have tried our best.
So, Mr. Friesen, before we cast our votes, are we clear that you are continued to October, would be continued to October the 20th? You will report and document for us, and Catherine, I think, will be in contact on progress on the list of remaining items, and then we are going to remand back to HP the items that are showing as non-conforming, and then paragraph 4 site work in those items for clarification.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else that we need to address? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote. We're continued to October the 20th.
Thank you.
We have a motion to adjourn. Need a second?
Okay.
All in favor? We are adjourned.